Hello and welcome to another Crichton Report Extended, and we deal with a chapter that is mysteriously missing from the original book. If you are squeamish, faint-hearted, easily offended, or the kind of person that lives in a Mary Poppins movie, that is, that you think that the whole world is made of sweet and honey, then I suggest that this is not the episode for you. You've been warned.
Where do you think you're going? Grass.
Run!
Haven't forgotten that today's my birthday, have you? I did remind you yesterday, remember?
Yes, let go, you're hurting me.
Oh, I am sorry.
You better come and see me tomorrow. It's been an increase for you. Another 20p.
It was a mistake, to be honest.
You shouldn't have done it, Stumpy, because now I'm going to do you.
Keep away from me, Stepson.
Come on in, Stepson.
So this particular subject, which is mysteriously missing from the Crichton report, hardly a warts and all book, is it? So the first thing to say is, I'm not doing the definitive history of bullying at Crichton School in the 70s. I can only give my personal experience of it. So my definition of serious bullying is when you're fearful of your life, where you start not wanting to go to school, and you might, if it keeps on going, you might even start feeling suicidal. I can understand the seriousness of bullying. I'm not trying to belittle it. As I said, I'm trying to give my personal experience of bullying in Crichton School in the 70s. We had a famous journalist called Tony Young, and he gives a lecture.
And I had myself a pretty ropey education. I went to 3 different state schools, state secondary schools, in the high watermark of the progressive era. The first state school I went to was a comprehensive in Muswell Hill called Creighton, which became the subject of a Sunday Times expose called the Crichton Report, because it was so unbelievably bad. I emerged at the age of 16 with 1 O-level. I'd failed all the rest. And pretty much the only thing I knew how to do, the only thing I was taught at these 2 comprehensives over a 5-year period was how to roll a joint.
So the only thing Tony Young learned how to do in all the years he was at Crichton is to roll a joint. And he says he only passed 1 O-level, blaming the school. Isn't that a typical journalist? You know, never let the truth get in the way of a good story. So he says that, he's even gulping when he says this, you know, it's obvious a lie. It's obvious a lie. I mean, I passed all my exams. you know, and I'm not exactly, you know, the brainiest person in Britain, you know what I'm saying? But yes, he blames the school. Can't you just accept, Tony, that you were a bit of a twerp? You didn't work hard enough, and that's why he only got 1 O-level. So Crichton School did have a bad reputation. I remember leaving my primary school, which, to be honest with you, was like a rural school. It was like a country school. In reality, my old school was only 5 minutes away from Crichton. But in my old school, it was like being in the country. You never saw a lot of people from ethnic minorities. So you would never see a coloured guy or anyone, or an Indian or anyone in my old school. So going to Crichton School was a bit of an eye-opener. It was like going into, as I said, the country to the city. I was looking around. I was actually quite happy. I just said to myself when I went to the school, you know, this is the real world. You know, this is the real world. I was actually quite happy about it, but it was a much, much, much bigger school than my old school. So Crichton School had a bad reputation. All my friends at my primary school, well, most of them, they wanted to avoid Crichton School like the plague. You know, a lot of stories, a lot of this, even says it in the book with Mr. Loads. It's there that one lunchtime, 3 kids went to Highgate Wood and they were given drugs and they were behaving very peculiarly. And they came to Crichton and everything, and they realised the police were involved in everything. They caught the drug pushers, but yes, another dope scare at Crichton School. So it was all in the newspapers at the time. We're talking early 70s here. So Crichton School had a bad reputation from that report. As I said, the police and everything, they were saying that this kind of stuff was happening all over. It doesn't matter if it was a grammar school, high-class schools, comprehensives, whatever. The drug thing was happening everywhere. Another drug scare at Crichton, you would have all these reports and everything in the newspaper, how bad Crichton School was. Anyway, this friend of mine, Stephen Jacobs, who was a year older than me in primary school, went to Crichton and he comes down for a visit. And I asked him, I said, is Crichton School as bad as they say it is? And he says to me, Andy, you know, it's all a load of rubbish. Crichton School's a good school. And I said, well, have you been in any fights? Andy, not only have I not been in any fights, I've never even seen a fight. So I thought, oh, this is good. So I went to Crichton School, you know, thinking that it was all rubbish. The first Friday I'm in Crichton School, I'm in a fight. The first Friday, so you start on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday I'm in my first fight. It was these black guys, they were hanging around and they said to me, see this area here? I said, yeah. You're not allowed here ever. And I said, what are you talking about, I'm not allowed here ever? This area is a no-go for you. Do you want to make something of it? And I said, yeah, too right, I want to make something of it. We had a fight, I lost, and boundaries were drawn. I don't know what it was like in their old school. Obviously, they probably had no-goes areas in their old school. But I mean, this was the first Friday. There was never a no-go area in our school. You know, it was a fantasy by these black guys that sort of thought that they could draw boundaries. So bullying at Crichton School, no. It was more like the Keystone cops of bullying. So my exit, the way I used to go home from Crichton School from the south wing, is an exit where you have Twyford Avenue, and there used to be a lot of holly all the way down the road to Forties Green Road, and the holly used to continue all the way up past all the shops on the other side, and it used to just, you just couldn't avoid it. So there was this second year kid, I mean, we were first years, we were like that. He was like that, this blonde-haired kid. He used to wait for us. I mean, I used to walk with somebody, hardly ever used to walk by myself, but I used to walk with somebody. And this second year, blonde-haired kid used to love to push us in the holly. No fighting, he would push us in the holly. Obviously, there was only one of him. He used to get one of us, and one of us would end up in that holly. I don't know if you've ever been pushed in Holly. It's not a very pleasurable experience. But, you know, when I say he was there every night, I'm talking about every night. You know, we used to walk along the road and sort of think, he's not here. Then suddenly he would jump out behind a car and he would suddenly say, guess who? And he'd be there. Every kind of scenario used to happen. He used to walk along. He would get one of my friends or get somebody. Someone would go in the Holly anyway. So sometimes we get past him, sometimes we run past him. We escaped today. But eventually, I only remember one time where he actually got me, pushed me in, and I'm in my back in the Holly. Was the most painful thing you'll possibly ever imagine. But it was something that we had to endure every single 3:30, at the end of Crichton, we had to endure, and he would be there every single time. He would wait for us and he would do his bit. I can understand the fun element that he had from that. I can understand the fun element. When I went into the second year, I sort of walked along the road. I thought, hey, he's not here. First day, second day, it took at least 5-6 evenings for me to look around and sort of say, I don't believe it. This second year kid is not here. But yeah, every night some poor Crichtonian would actually be pushed in the Holly. But I can see the funny side of that anyway.
You're a new boy, ain't you? Can't you talk?
Yeah.
Sir? Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
That's better. Where is it then?
Where's what?
Your money.
What for?
Sure, don't get hurt, son. That's what for.
I'm not giving you my money. Get off, it hurts.
I did tell you.
20.
That all you got?
That's all I got.
Every Monday you come looking for me, right? With your 20p. Right? And you tell anyone, and I'll put you in a wheelchair.
So if you have a look in Grange Hill, you can see money being demanded with menaces. Now, my experience is that no one came up to me and asked me for my dinner money. I know that it did happen, because I remember Dr. Singh actually addressed us in assembly once, and he said, well, you couldn't really understand Dr. Singh. Well, there were money with menaces. I said, pardon? I don't have money with menaces. And I said to him, what's he talking about? He goes, someone says to me, yeah, there's kids that demand money with menaces. That's the first time I ever heard that expression in the first year. The very first time, and Dr. Singh actually says, I know it is school, money with menaces. What he was trying to say was, I don't want to ever hear in this school that money with menaces is going on.
Oh, flipping it. We'll never get served here. I thought you were boycotting it because he increased prices. I am, except when I'm starving.
Watch yourself, Jenkins.
And you watch your shoving, Benson.
Are you going to sort this out, are you? I'm a prefect now. Remember?
Remember I said to you that Tucker Jenkins reminds me of my good friend Jeffrey Edgar. And he's being bullied here by this, is my favourite bully in Grange Hill actually, this guy called Booger Benson.
Oh, you're a jammy. What you're talking about is talent. Oh!
Get off, Booger!
Don't, fatty.
Why, Jenkins? What are you going to do about it?
Get lost.
What's this? You entering this stupid competition?
Look, leave it out, Booger. It took me ages to do that.
Open wide. Tucker, leave it out!
Get off.
He's right, Tucker.
And Booger Benson, I mean, he's a bit of a caricature, he's not a real villain, is he? Even I can do an impression of him. Do you want to make something of it, Jenkins?
You want to make something of it, Jenkins?
Don't argue with me.
You want to make something of it, Jenkins? I mean, that's a caricature. That is a real caricature. The real type of bully was the Gripper Stetson type. No wonder he used to get death threats when he was in Grange Hill, bullying poor Roland.
Now then, what do you reckon the increase should be? Another 10p?
What increase?
Ain't it typical? I was prepared to scrub the payments if you won, but you lost. So it's only right I should up the cost of my services.
I can't afford it.
Personally, I think a 10p rise is more than reasonable. What? Sorry, I can't quite hear what you're saying. Now, if you're in agreement, I can go and attend to more important business.
So not only, I have to admit that, you know, my character is more of this character here.
Hello, Bennett.
I never said anything. Honestly, I didn't.
Just make sure it stays that way, okay?
Got any money on you?
No.
Jump up and down.
What for?
You heard? Jump. Come on, hand over.
Give.
I'll be honest with you, you know, I'd rather take the beating. You know, if you give your dinner money, that means you stay hungry, you know, and I'm not the kind of person to stay hungry. Do you know what I'm saying? So I'll just say to the bully, you know, well, beat me up, you know, I'm going to keep the dinner money in my pocket.
Hello. Hello. My name's Justin Bennett. What's your name? It's Judy. Judy Preston. Is this bigger than your last school? I didn't want to come here. Nor did I. None of my friends are here. My mum says we'll make lots of new friends. I won't. I hate this school.
Yeah, I was more of a Justin Bennett. I mean, I even had long hair like Justin Bennett. I wasn't as wet as him. You know, I wasn't into music and playing pianos and stuff like that. But I have to shamefully say that my character in Crichton School was more like Justin Bennett, and you can see him being bullied here by old Booger.
Come on, form an orderly queue. Oi! Form an orderly queue. Where do you think you're going? Grass.
Leave it out, Booger. They'll be already after you.
So? Doing him over ain't gonna make no difference. Is it? Run!
And every time I see this scene, it makes me laugh, because Jeffrey Edgar, you know, he was quite a popular kid, and obviously Tucker Jenkins is a popular kid. You wouldn't have the most popular kid being bullied. Especially Jeffrey Edgar, because he's good at games. So there was a Channel 4 film, it was a film about a boarding school. It was called Good and Bad at Games. I still believe that it's still on YouTube if you want to check that out. But that was what real bullying was about. And in the end, and he attempts to get his revenge on his bully by taking a gun. I don't suggest that. I don't suggest that, you know, if you ever think of any bully that ever bullied you at school, that you should actually get a gun and try and shoot him. But that was a really good film. It suggested that this character called Wog, I don't know why they called him Wog, it was a silly name, but this character called Wog, he thought he had a whole load of friends, but they weren't friends of his, really. They were friends of his because he is good at games, scores good tries, scores goals at football and everything. So that's what I'm saying. I find that really, really unrealistic that Jeffrey Edgar would be bullied. If you're good at games, you are never, ever going to get bullied. So we're in Crichton School now, we're in the first year, and at the back end of the north wing of Crichton School, there's this staircase, you go down, and I'm at the top of the staircase, and there's this black girl, she's standing next to the banisters, and she starts pushing first years down the stairs. And I'm watching this, you know, he pushes one down the stairs, I mean literally pushing them down the stairs. Pushes Simon Kowalski. Yeah, Simon Kowalski just turns back and just gives a dirty look, and I just said, you know, my sense of justice and everything, I said to myself, she better not push me down the stairs. So I walk and she tries to push me down the stairs, and I turn around and I face her. And rightly or wrongly, I give her a little punch on her muscle like this, as if to say, stop doing that. She decided at that moment that I should live no more. She got her umbrella out and she started whacking me and was slowly going down the stairs. All I'm doing is holding her back. I'm not fighting her, I'm just trying to contain her. I said, look, and she's whacking me and I can feel my arms being whacked. And we're going towards the corner of the stairs. And then her friend, I don't know if it was her sister, another black girl, she decides to join in as well. And they're both whacking me with their big umbrellas, and whack, whack, and I'm going like this. Once both girls started to hit me, I couldn't, I'm protecting myself with one umbrella, but the other girl is actually getting my head with the other umbrella, and the way they're hitting me on my arm, it's hurting my arm anyway, hurting my head, and I remember crouching down, and I'm sitting now. Are they going to stop? No, they're going to continue whacking me and whacking me and whacking me. Those two girls decided that I should live no more. Anyway, I would have given this was a serious assault we're talking about here. I would have given myself another minute and I wouldn't be here talking to you. In Grange Hill, for instance, every time a fight breaks out, there's always a teacher on hand to stop it.
Anyway, you've been thoroughly sneaky about this election right from the start. First said you weren't going to stand any leak on my ideas.
What's that with her? She knows she's going to lose the election.
Yeah, well, if I do, it's because you haven't played fair, Trisha Yates. You're a nasty, two-faced little bitch.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, this is a fine way for two candidates for the school council to be carrying on.
In Crichton school, all 90 teachers, the majority of them, they're in their classrooms, everyone else is moving about. Every fight that I've ever witnessed at Crichton school always drew out to its bitter conclusion. Anyway, I'm down there, I realise that I'm in real trouble. So these fourth year girls, I'm sure they were fourth year girls, third year girls, they were really big girls. I'm this size and they're that size, both these girls. And I realised that the end is 9. Luckily for me, I think this 4th, 5th or 6th former comes and he stops me, and I remember him very distinctively. He stopped the girls and everything and he pulled me away and he said, are you okay and everything? I said, I really thank that person. There was a guy in my class called Andrew Brennan. Now, Andrew Brennan was an American. I don't think he was in our school for too long, but he was in our first year class. And he says to me, you were doing okay with one of them, but when the other one came in, that's when you found it really difficult and that's when you were finished. And if I was back there, I would have told Andrew Brennan, you Americans were late to turn up for World War I, you were late to turn up for World War II, but at least you turned up. Andrew Brennan would have just sit there, just watching. I remember he had long hair and he had I don't know what you call it, the brace, like an Indian round his head. But it was this guy called Andrew Brennan. I thought he had the cheek to say, he says, well, you were doing okay with one girl, but, when the other girl came here, you had no chance. Thank you, Andrew Brennan, for actually, you would have witnessed my demise. And if it hadn't been for that 6th former, they would have been laying flowers. I wouldn't even have got a plaque. They're not going to remember that some Crichtonian was actually beaten to death in this little corner of Crichton School. teacher who used to go to Crichton School himself. He's in this photograph here. His second name is not conducive to metalwork. It's conducive to another organic material who I heard actually was a teacher of that material as well. But he's actually in this photograph here. And if you remember a few chapters ago, I told you we had a lot of bad apples in our year. It turns out that all the bad apples, well, I'm not going to say all of them, but I'm going to say 60 to 65% of the bad apples that were in our year actually ended up in this class. The only person that was actually from my original class in that metalwork classroom was a person called Andre Cove. So he gave us this project. He gave us this project to do. What it was a piece of art, really. What you would do is you had this board of wood. You would cut it into a certain shape, and you would get a whole load of metal lines, and you would put them into their particular shapes. You would stick them, but you would go into the forging room, and you would bang the metal and everything to make it a nice little shape, which was hardly a brain-testing exercise in engineering. Anyway, we were going to this forge room, talk about health and safety. There was hundreds of us in there. When I say hundreds, we were a class of what? Say 20, 25 pupils. I already told you that we have 65% of the bad apples. We had someone called Colin Hagger in the class, and you would go into this forging room, and basically you would heat up your piece of metal, and then you would just bang it, and then you put it in the water. Yeah, health and safety. You would have, you would have people holding their pieces of metal, banging these really hot, and using these forges and tongs, these flamethrower tongs sort of things. And you would just be standing there, and a piece of metal will go past your head like that as someone tries to put it in the water. Not very health and safety conscious at all. Anyway, you had the teacher, I'll never forget it, as they were being so dangerous and everything. Did the teacher say anything? No, he used to stand outside the forge room watching with a little smile on his face. How ridiculous was that? Anyway, I remember Andre Cove, he had this really expensive jumper with all this, the kind of embroidery, something, it was a really expensive jumper, and he looks at it, and it's singed right across there. So obviously someone put their little piece of metal and actually singed his jumper. And I remember him being so upset about it, and I said, Andre Cove, you may have lost that jumper. That could have easily been on your face for life. And we used to look, and this teacher, who I said was in this photograph, he never even used to be there. He used to come in for 10 minutes, give the little project, have a look, and just leave. Literally, this double lesson, he wouldn't be there at all. When I said he wouldn't be there at all, I'm not talking about he wouldn't be there for one lesson. He wasn't there for obviously he was there 5 minutes to start it off, and he would disappear for the whole lesson. And I'm sure if he's out there, he said, but Andy, I had teacher training. Remember, this is the first year, it says it in the book, it's the first year he was actually in as a teacher, and that's the year I'm talking about, 1974/75. We never saw that teacher all year. Anyway, I talked to my other friends, we used to have these these two black guys that were the real bullies in our school. They were called the Kinch twins, the Kinches. They were like the Krays, and I can tell you they were the kind of people you do not mess about with. So all these bullies used to bully everybody in class, only because, I only realised now, so that they wouldn't be bullied by the Kinches. But anyway, as I said, we got all the rotten apples in this metalwork class, and at one point I said to everybody, when I said to everybody, I'm talking about the 20-30%, the good guys, the good guys, I said, do you want to do this project that this teacher's given you? And they looked in the forge room, they was just so dangerous, it was unbelievable. As I said, the teacher wasn't even there. Colin Hagger and his friends, we used to look in the forge room, and they used to play flamethrowers they used, you know, do you remember Game of Thrones when you have two dragons fighting each other? They would use their flamethrowers to actually fight each other. And they would, their flamethrowing, you know, totally and absolutely dangerous. Of course, if someone like Colin Hagger, for instance, you know, got caught on fire, you know, if he started to burn, you know, as a humanitarian myself, I would jump into action. I would totally jump into action. You know, the first thing I would do is say my classic line, "Flying tonight!" That's the first thing I would do. And obviously this is 1974. No mobile cameras or anything like that. But if it was the 21st century, definitely I would get out my mobile camera. You know, and start filming. You know, I start filming the action. You know, do you know what I'm saying? But the sad part about it, to be honest and serious about it, 1974-75, there's no way you can tell me that in that room, you know, in the late 70s, early 80s, that someone wasn't burnt really badly in that room. You know, someone has to get burnt. Someone has to get burnt for these teachers to realise what health and safety. And I heard that somebody actually said that this teacher actually left Crichton and became an inspector. Inspecting what, I ask? You know, certainly not health and safety. Probably went to a girls' school. And yeah, you know, it's probably the inspector of school uniform, probably saying to the girls, let me have a look at your knickers. That is not regulation uniform. Off. But sir, I said off. You know, because this teacher was a bit of the Jack the Lad. Now, one day in the class, for instance, as I said, the teacher wasn't there. You know, even the bullies got fed up of being dangerous in the forge room. We're all sitting in the class now, and Colin Hagger, the little runt that he was, gets up and decides to use me as a kicking bag. Yeah, because I'm going to practice my karate, you know, on Andreas here. And he's kicking me there, kicking me there. In our old school, for instance, if you ever kicked, they used to call you a girl. But in this day and age, for instance, you know, Kung Fu was all the rage and everything, and he was doing a flying drop kick on me and this and that. I couldn't attack him or anything. He had all his friends sitting there, although actually all his friends weren't even watching. And he was kicking me and kicking me. So I'm being beaten up in his class. You know, I'm actually being beaten up in the class. I don't think you even heard that. You know, even in Grange Hill, I never even see anything like that. You know, I'm actually being beaten up in the class. And at the end, this Chinaman comes up to me, and he's one of the bullies as well. And he says to me, why don't you protect yourself? Why don't you do a Captain Kirk and do a double punch? And I said to him, why don't you get real? Do me a favour. But I will forgive this teacher for being beaten up in the class. I mean, I just imagine if that class was something important. I mean, it was a crappy class, hardly a feat of engineering, the actual project. I've already told you about that. You know, but I will actually forgive this teacher for being beaten up in class. And just imagine, as I said, if it was something like mathematics or chemistry or something, and you had all these bullies in the class that were holding you back. But I will forgive this teacher completely if I find out that he was actually doing someone's missus down Ringwood Avenue. You know, all around Crichton School, the North Wing, I mean, you had really these plush houses, all 5-bedroom houses, really, really nice thing. If he tells me that he was doing some high-class totty down Ringwood Avenue, I would forgive him completely. This teacher had his surname for brains, and his surname was in his underpants. But, you know, I'm really, really peeved about this teacher. You know, a typically designed class for him to miss the lesson. I mean, I can understand if you were there 20 years, you know, and you just didn't want to be in the lesson anymore. Your first year, you should be actually excited. And the biggest cheek is, in the book, he actually said that he actually confronted a bully and actually stopped it. I want to tell this teacher, I said, you've got to actually be there to actually stop it. Now, this is exactly the time this book was written, exactly the time, 1974-75. You were never there to stop anybody. So we're in the technical drawing class, And we used to sit on these big stools, if you remember, and you know, you have your board in front of you like this. I go and sit down and I've sat on a drawing pin. And what the hell, I turn round and Colin Hagger is laughing his head off. He's just put the drawing pin on and I've sat on it. He's laughing, the little runt is laughing his head off. Anyway, I told you how good I was at sports. How good as well I was at sports. If I did bowling, if I threw a cricket ball, it would go that way. Or I remember when we used to have snowball fights, you know, they used to be able to throw snowballs directly at me and I would throw it and it would end up on the roof, you know, behind the other house on the other street. I was terrible. Anyway, I picked it up and I just flicked it towards him. Flicked the drawing pin towards Colin Hagger and I swear to you it landed right here. It landed this much away from his eye. He doesn't realise, because I know he's into motorbikes and everything, he was this close to be called One-Eyed Hagger. He wouldn't have even been allowed to drive a push bike. You know, one of those scooters that, you know, you remember those little scooters they used to have when you were 3 years old? He wouldn't have even been allowed to ride one of those. So that's how close Colin Hagger was. And as I threw it, I turned back and I looked forward and one of the kinches, you know, with his little dark glasses and his specs, sort of looks at me as if to say, what's all this? You know, so that's how it was. You know, you would have all these bullies. They were the keystone cops of bullies. You know, the Kinch brothers were the real bullies. They just didn't want to be bullied by them. So they used to bully. And you know, when they used to come up to you, I just told you before, they would come up to you, I'm beating you up outside. You know, no reason at all. You know, most of the time, the fights never took place. In fact, I would say 99.9% of the time, the fights never took place. In my old school, if someone said they were going to beat you up outside, that fight took place and they would beat you up outside. So it was more or less the keystone cops of bullying. But having said that, you know, even if I saw the Kinches today or Colin Hagger, you know, I know that bullies like this, they grow out of it. I would actually buy him a drink. And I'm sure if I met him, you know, he would buy me a drink in a bar as well. I remember we used to have this bully in the primary school. I mean, really tough guy, and he used to bully everybody. You know, you meet him in a bar and everything, oh, hello there, Andres, you know, I'll buy you a drink. So these bullies, I do not have any animosity towards at all. The only bullier I really have an animosity to is the intellectual bully. You know, the intellectual bully that knows that he's much cleverer than you. He uses his mind to bully you. Yeah, you must have met these kind of people all through your life. You know, you're doing business with them and they, you know, if they can be rude to you, they will. I'll give you an example. I mean, David Singleton, I told you he was the cleverest kid in the school. He used to be bullied something rotten. And I remember we were outside Tetherdown, you know, the old part of Crichton School near the South Wing, waiting for Mr. Plumpson's music class, and I remember they were bullying him. They would get David Singleton's suitcase, they would empty it out, one other person would come up and they would throw it in a tree, you know, and they would really bully David Singleton something rotten because he was so clever. I remember Miss Carr one day in the class saying, please don't bully Singleton because he's got a very good brain. That's right. Don't bully, and I'm not paraphrasing here, that's exactly the way she said it. She said, don't bully David Singleton because he's got a very good brain. And I was thinking, yeah, you know, what we'll do is we'll take David Singleton's brain, put it in a glass case, and then kick the you-know-what out of the rest of him. You know, but anyway, they were bullying him outside Tetherdown, as I said, and it was bully after bully. And I don't know why we were waiting there for 10, 15 minutes, but it was just pick on Singleton. So this geezer, yeah, Trevor Norman, you know, he was a bit of a weed, you know, he was smaller than me anyway. You know, he decides to pick up David Singleton's bag to bully him one more last time, and I just got so fed up, I just pulled him back. I said, I think that's enough, don't you? He didn't think that was enough at all. So a fight ensued, and I'm fighting Trevor Norman, you know, and everyone around, yeah, you know how it is everyone, you know, ebbing you on. Now, a few days before this fight, we're in Mr. Brodrim's science lab, and you know you used to have these Bunsen burners, and you used to have a tripod and everything. Anyway, Mr. Brodrim said, can you please write up this experiment in your notebook? I don't know why, but I was so stupid. I saw the Bunsen burner and it was the tripod, and I sort of said, I wonder if that's still hot. You know, I had to be an idiot to sort of wonder if that is still hot, and I actually put all my fingers on it. You know, and I suddenly had all these blisters on all my fingers and it was burning. I put it under water, you know, had to go to the, you know, the medical department to get myself bandaged up. So I'm actually fighting Trevor Norman with a bandaged hand. And I'm still giving him a good hiding, and I'm fighting him with, you know, just my left hand. And I remember at the end, Sharon Hayesworth actually said to me, that wasn't a fair fight, that wasn't a fair fight. But it was so funny. And then I look in the window and it's Mr. Plumpson, and he's looking out the window at the fight. I don't know how much of it he saw, but I would imagine, you know, when you're fighting, when there's bullies in the playground and everything, it really is up to you. You know, you're not going to get the teachers. No one's going to go up to the teacher and say, oh yeah, there's a fight and this and that. I think, you know, it's sort of the playground rule, if you know what I'm saying. But I remember that, you know, I'm fighting Trevor Norman, you know, with one hand and giving him a jolly good hiding. So I wanted to join the chess club at Creighton School, you know, an after-school activity. And I go down there and Singleton says to me, okay, come on, I'll give you a game. So he gives me a game. We're sitting also with Michael Peppu. And Singleton says, yeah, I think I'll try a scholar's mate. You know, I think I'll try a scholar's mate. Scholar's mate is the classic move. I don't know if you know it. It's a way of attacking the opponent's weakest pawn. Just attack that pawn and eventually you'll get the person into mate. Most beginners fall for it. Basically, you've got to move your queen, and you know, as I said, most beginners fall for it. I never fell for it, but he kept on going. I think I'm going to try a scholar's mate, and a steer's mate, an Anderson mate. Let's try an Arabian mate as well. And it's checkmate, 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 checkmate. And then Singleton says to me, "Do you still want to join the chess club, Andreas?" And I'm thinking, you know, getting really, really annoyed. He even got me with a Frankie Abbott. I don't know if you remember Frankie Abbott. He was a schoolboy in the TV series Please Sir. Frankie Abbott was the one who always used to behave like a kid in class. He would always be caught smoking in the labs.
What were you doing in assembly this morning? Abbott! What? Oh, nothing. Oh, he's having a smoke in the labs.
Oh, sweet cigarettes.
Ah, I'm on a pipe these days.
Anyway, he would come along and Singleton would get his bishop and he would go. So even Singleton got me with a Frankie Abbott and I was so annoyed. I used to protect him. I used to protect him as a little kid, you know, in the first year, and this is how he treats me. But these are the humanitarians. The humanitarians, Michael Peppu, for instance, okay, he was nowhere near as clever as Singleton, but I can just imagine he was the kind of person who, you know, I can just imagine him, you know, quite high up in some company, maybe a CEO, and his underlings, he would make their life hell. You know, he goes, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? Oh, you're useless and you know the type. You know, I've met these kind of people all through my working life. You know, these are the bullies that were bullies when they're youngsters and they carry on being bullies as they're older. You know, don't think Singleton is going to use his brains for a development or a cure for cancer. I promise you he won't be doing that. Because I actually went out with a girl who used to be in cancer research. And she took me down to Holborn. There's a research facility down near Holborn Station in London. I went in there, I was really fascinated and everything. It was like being back in school again in the chemistry. You know, if you can imagine all the labs in Crichton School 4 times bigger. You smelt that chlorine. I really loved it. And I just said to the girl I was going out with, I said, what grades did you get in your A-levels? And she says to me, 2 Ds and an E. I said, 2 Ds and an E, and you're doing cancer research. These are not the best brains. I mean, if I was Singleton, If I was Singleton, I would have gone into something like pharmaceuticals, where you actually invent drugs, where the real money is. The real money. So humanitarian awards, these people will never achieve. So we come up to my friend Hunter Davis, who writes a book and leaves out bullying. And I'm starting to think, this is more of a propaganda. This is more of a sort of a look at comprehensive schools in a more positive light. Now, we already know that Hunter Davis wrote 3 reports for the Sunday Times, and we know they were damning reports because they went to the House of Commons and he was put up in the dock to actually explain himself. Now, I asked the forum if I could get hold of these 3 original reports. I know these people were trying to help. They said, well, you know, you can go to their website, you know, the Sunday Times website, and find out from there. You've got to actually join. You've got to subscribe. I mean, I'm not going to subscribe to the Sunday Times website for the off chance of looking for articles that were in the early 70s, if I was going to find it. And those people that kindly told me, well, if you don't find it there, you can also find it from a curator. The only problem is there is never a curator around when you need one. But the point is, we know that's a fact. This is not a supposition. The fact was that those were 3 damning reports. And suddenly, a few months later, we get suddenly a favourable report. You know, it's obvious that there must have been some political arm twisting that was involved in this. But anyway, if Hunter Davis ever contacts me and says to me, well, actually, I did write the book out of the goodness of my heart, you know, then I will actually owe him an apology. So that's the conclusion. Those are the people, you know, all the bullies and everything I told you in the past. I actually forgive every single one of them. I would buy them all a drink. I won't be buying, you know, the you know, people like David Singleton and Michael Peppu and Michael Ellenberg. They will not be winning any humanitarian awards. And I'm sure Hunter Davis, don't tell me that he's going to win a humanitarian award for writing the Crichton School report after he's written 3 damning reports for the Sunday Times. So I hope you all enjoyed this particular episode. I'm sorry it wasn't a Mary Poppins sort of episode. You know, we're talking a lot of factual stuff here, nitty-gritty stuff, if you like. But I hope you enjoyed this episode nonetheless, and I hope to see you all, as always, another time. And welcome back to the Humanitarian Award of the 21st Century. And the nominations are Piers Morgan for The Phone Bugger's Guide to Buggering, Toby Young for all his unbiased journalism, Simon Cowell for reducing his commission fee to all his artists from 95 to 94%. And finally, Hunter Davis for creating the Crichton report out of the goodness of his own heart. And the winner is Hunter Davis. Oh shit. And all that's left for me to do is to present Hunter Davis with the 21st Century Humanitarian Award. Wouldn't you like to say a few words? Thank you, Mr. Cynic. I'd like to thank you all for all your votes needed to win this award. And looking at it, I would probably have done better collecting Green Shield stamps at a local Texaco gas station. Back in the day, I wrote 3 damning exposés on Crichton for the Sunday Times, and was virtually put in the dock by the then Labour government, who told me I had done more damage to the comprehensive system than the entire bombing by the Luftwaffe in World War II. And if something wasn't done, the government threatened to demolish the Sunday Times building in Fleet Street and convert it into a multi-storey car park. I was then told in no uncertain terms by the Sunday Times to write a favourable report this time. I said no problem. I will lie. Not difficult for a journalist lying, is it? But when I got to the door, he said to me, "Hunter, better still write a bloody book." And I said, "Oh shit." And contrary to popular belief, I didn't spend a whole year at Crichton writing the book. I actually spent 3 mornings, 1 afternoon, and a picnic. The rest of the notes were given to me by teachers and pupils, and I just patched them all together like an Indian bloody tapestry. And that Andreas Charalambous, my partner in crime, keeps writing extended chapter after chapter on that bloody school. The way he's going, he will eventually make the book Gone with the Wind look like a bloody school circular. And to add insult to injury, the Crichton report is not owned by me, but owned by the Haringey Council. I wasn't even given any royalties for the 200 copies they sold and the few extra scaled-down club versions that they printed. If I had the royalties, it would have been the most profitable book I've ever bloody written. Who ever heard of a bloody journalist winning a humanitarian award? I could have done worse by winning the annual award for gullibility. But that honour can only be won by any ex-Crichtonian who actually believes that the Crichton report is a factual piece of history of their old school. They are fortunate that Toby Young wasn't given the arduous task of writing the book. Otherwise it could have been called 330 Ways to Roll a Joint, or How to Get Even Higher at High School, or maybe even How I Blame Crichton for Being Such a Burk. Good night and sod off to you all.